Former National Security Advisor John Bolton still a potential wild card in the impeachment proceedings, not agreeing to testify yet. But privately, it seems, he was venting to a group of wealthy investors at a Miami speech last week. According to many people who heard his remarks and talked to NBC News exclusively, Bolton, speaking to hedge fund managers at a Morgan Stanley conference, took issue with the president's grasp on foreign policy, specifically Mr. Trump's embrace of Turkey's President Erdogan in the face of bipartisan condemnation, and the role business interests may play in that relationship. Erdogan, we should note, is meeting with the president at the White House tomorrow. Joining me now, NBC News correspondent Carol Lee, who along with Stephanie Wu broke that story, and MSNBC political analyst Elise Jordan. Carol, tell us about your story, because it seems that Bolton really kind of let a lot of cats out of the bag when he was talking to the hedge fund managers.
Yeah, that's right. So Stephanie Wu and I are reporting that Bolton was at this conference in Miami last Wednesday night, and he was really there to give the keynote speech. And we should say that this was billed to him as something that was off the record, where he could speak candidly. And according to the people we talked to in the room, he really did. He not only talked about Turkey, which he said, Andrea, was the most frustrating thing, policy decision by the president that he had seen. He really didn't understand it. He said no one was aligned with the president on Turkey among his team, and suggested that there must be some business or personal reason for the approach that the president was taking to Turkey. Perhaps more interestingly, or equally as interesting, he was asked, what happens it's 2021. President Trump wins a second term. He's unleashed. What does he do? And he took that opportunity to kind of take a stab at the president's son-in-law and daughter, Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner, where he surmised that they would try to get the president to rewrite his legacy and convince him to nominate a liberal like Lawrence Tribe, who's a Harvard professor and a critic of President Trump, to the Supreme Court. And he also criticized Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, a Republican who has a very isolationist view on foreign policy, and said Trump would go, could go full isolationist and pull out of NATO and other things. And then lastly, I would say more broadly speaking, Bolton, according to people who heard his speech, really took issue with the way the president approached foreign policy, saying that it's not like real estate deals. You can't lose one and then move on to the next. And he expressed concern about the president's approach as a transactional kind of negotiator on foreign policy, that was going to hurt the U.S. over the long term, that there needed to be a consistency and also an understanding of the interconnectedness of the America's relationships with other countries across the globe. Bolton, we should say, declined to comment for this story, but we spoke to a number of people in the room who heard his words firsthand.
It's sort of amazing, Elise, because, you worked with John Bolton, and you know that he had different kinds of relationships, let's say, with the State Department and with the White House, and leading up to his being nominated for UN ambassador, never confirmed, but served as a recess appointment. But you worked with him in the Bush NSC, and so you've seen him up close. And he seemed to have been very, very forthcoming, at least, with the Morgan Stanley people.
I would not want to mess with John Bolton, period, especially in a bureaucratic infight, and especially now in this war that is seeping through into the press. And something that I found really interesting about Carol and Stephanie's reporting was that Bolton really teased what is going to be in his book. He sounded very forthright. What he said was, I don't think we should downplay at all. It was simply jaw-dropping to have your former national security advisor accuse the president of having business interests that influence his foreign policy decisions is simply jaw-dropping. And I thought that the fact that he teased that there was going to be so much to come is really laying the groundwork for what is going to be a messy obstacle for the Trump administration.
And Carol, as I remember, you traveled with him to Turkey at a very critical time and had some extraordinary reporting from that trip where he got himself on the wrong side of Erdogan just before he arrived in Turkey. So he has a real, axe to grind also against Erdogan, who's coming tomorrow for this big meeting at the White House.
Yeah, that's right, Andrea. We traveled last, I think it was April, it was January of 2019, went to Israel and Turkey. It was, you remember it was the week of the president's first announcement that he was withdrawing all troops from Syria after speaking with Erdogan on the phone. And when we were in Ankara, President Erdogan just pulled back on a meeting with John Bolton, and John Bolton said that was just fine with him. And, he's always been someone who's tougher on this issue than clearly the president is.
Carol Lee, another exclusive story, and Elise Jordan, Carol Lee, and Stephanie Wu breaking that story. Thank you so much.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.